Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, I'm going to talk about codependence versus love. Now, this is something that I personally really struggled with. And as you know, if you're watching me, you're probably the codependent one. You probably are dealing with a narcissistic ex if you are finding the content on my channel helpful. I was in that same position and I was the codependent in the relationship. And so now I say I'm a recovering. I don't know if you're ever fully recovered, but I'm a recovering codependent. And, as most of you know, my husband passed away about a year and a half ago. And so as we start to move into new relationships and things, this sort of dynamic rears its ugly head again, right? Because it's like, I don't want to make that same mistake. Now, Thomas, my husband that passed, was not a narcissist. My previous husband was. And so I've obviously made the correction the second time around. But when you're in emotionally vulnerable states, like a breakup or like a co-parent that is manipulative and all those kinds of things, it can mess with your head and cause you to fall back into old patterns that are comfortable and familiar. And if you're codependent and have those tendencies, that probably tends to be a comfort zone for you. I was thinking about this topic and I'm thinking, okay, what's the difference? Like, how do we know the difference between love and codependence? And it's very interesting because now that I've had two marriages, when I talk about those, it's not that my behaviors were so different between the first and second marriage, but it's that each of my husband's responses to me were very, very different. And so then my behaviors created a different feeling in me with Thomas than it did with my first husband. And so it was a much healthier relationship. Codependence versus love. The root of this for me is that, as I've shared before, I was raised in a Christian home. And I think in a Christian home, one of the things that's really drilled into our heads is sacrificial love, right? Christ's love for the church was sacrificial. And so that's kind of our model, right? And that's what we're taught. I was taught that love was sacrifice in a lot of ways. And as an adult, this kind of became a weakness because then I met my ex-husband who has these narcissistic tendencies. And so that's a person that then took advantage of me having this sacrificial model of love. Now, one of the things that I think Thomas would say if he was here is that sacrifice is more the husband's role from a Christian perspective than it is the wife's role. But I think that in a relationship, there's obviously times where we both have to have sacrificial love for the other person. I don't think that's exclusively male or female, although I will say that I do believe that most of the time the husband is, making certain types of sacrifices. I think our sacrifices look different. The point is that when this is coming through in a codependent, narcissistic kind of way, your feelings about it are going to be negative. You're going to have bitterness. You're going to have anger. You're going to have resentment. Why? Because you are sacrificing for the other person, but the other person is not reciprocating that. You then become very resentful, and that kind of builds up, right, over time because your needs aren't getting met. And this was my experience in my first marriage. And I can remember at the end him saying, "You're just angry all the time." Well, yeah, my bucket's not getting filled, so to speak, right? His was getting completely filled up, in my opinion anyway. He might have a different version of that, but in my opinion, his bucket stayed pretty full. Mine did not. But when you have sacrificial love for another person and you're doing it out of love, what feelings does that generate? That generates positive feelings. It generates feelings of joy, of peace. it makes you happy, it brings you pleasure to do for the other person. And I think that that was the difference in it for me with Thomas is it, I always say, I describe it like I always say we both were kind of like falling all over each other to see who could do more for the other person, right? He was such a kind, thoughtful person that it made me happy to do things for him and to make him happy. And I think he felt the same way. He felt like that, I was a good wife and all those things. And so it gave him joy to do things for me and to take care of me and all those kinds of things. In the codependent narcissistic relationship, you don't have that. So I think sometimes we get really focused on the codependence aspect of this in our own behaviors, which can kind of mess with our head because it kind of goes, oh, I shouldn't do anything for the other person. Or if I start to do something for the other person, I'm being codependent. Not necessarily. You may just be being loving. The codependence comes in when the other person is narcissistic and they take, and you're okay with that. And you continue to do that to the point to where you develop the negative feelings. So it's recognizing right away that that other person is not a giver, they're a taker. That's the difference in the dynamic of the relationship. So more so than focusing on, your own behavior, which I'm not saying it's not good to learn to be a little more self-nurturing and independent and self-caring and all that kind of thing. It can be. You can also take it to extremes. But in a healthy way, learning to do that also involves being with a partner that's able to meet you in that healthy balance of self-love and sacrificing for the other person, right? It's a balanced relationship. It's not lopsided like a narcissistic codependence relationship is. I hope that's helpful. If you guys like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new episodes are released. And if you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page. You can book a time to talk to one of my staff and learn how I might be able to support you on this journey. See you guys next time.